So I just wanted to start by saying hi, I'm Martha. I'm the Zero Waste Hub coordinator at the Shrub Co-op here in Edinburgh, and we run projects and campaigns and environmental programs around kind of the detrimental effects of the fast fashion industry and fashion waste, as well as food waste and transport. And yeah, we have a Zero Waste Hub, so if you're in Edinburgh, come and hang out with us when we reopen. I'd just like to introduce our panelists today. We've got Lynn Wilson, Siobhan McKenna, Kiaz Trepte, Vivienne Low, and also Niki from Fashion Revolution Scotland. And Lynn, I'd just like you to start off, if that's okay, explaining a wee bit about your circular economy work.
Thank you. So, so I'm a circular economy specialist, so a designer by training. I'm really focused on systems and how we develop new systems in clothing circulation. Just now, I'm in the middle of my PhD at Glasgow University. I'm focused on consumer behaviour and trying to understand how consumers make clothing disposal decisions. So how we decide that something is going to go online, or how we decide that we're going to put something in the bin, and how that decision-making process occurs. Do you want me to go on and answer all your questions, or it's just a quick?
That's great, thank you. Yeah, we'll just do a wee intro for now. So just moving on to Siobhan McKenna, it'd be awesome if you could chat a wee bit about the Rejean collective.
Hey, yeah, I'm Siobhan McKenna. I run a brand called Rejean, everything zero waste. Yeah, it's a zero waste denim brand. We only make clothing from reclaimed fabrics. The kind of aim is to create like high-end workwear pieces that are built to last, and they sort of look good on everyone, and they don't discriminate against like size, age, color, or gender. Yeah.
Awesome. And Kiaz Trepte, I know that we've tried to get a real range of amazing people today, looking from kind of local, practical mending skills all the way up to kind of haute couture and fast and large design projects. And I know that you've worked with Vivienne Westwood in the past, and are now working with Remode Collective in Edinburgh. So I just wanted to maybe, if you'd like to introduce a bit about those projects.
Yeah, hi, my name's Kiaz, and I'm presently the artistic director of the Remode Collective, which is, it's a company interest collective, and it's basically designed to use excess fabrics and waste fabrics within the community. But we're also very interested in getting refugees and people with different skills, sewing skills, tailors, anybody who's worked in the industry before, like myself, to spread that knowledge and actually share out the knowledge so people can use the knowledge collaboratively. For projects to improve on how we actually use up zero waste projects.
Sorry. Great. And then Vivienne Low, if you'd just like to introduce yourself with Fashion Revolution, and maybe also if you'd like to introduce your designing, but also a wee bit about Fashion Revolution Scotland, because it's Fashion Revolution Week.
Yes, it is. It's Fashion Revolution Week. Hi, I'm Vivienne Low. I'm a coordinator for Fashion Revolution Scotland. I'm based in Edinburgh, but I also support Fashion Revolution events in Dundee and Aberdeen as well, because I'm from Aberdeen and I work at the V&A in Dundee. So yeah, my background is I worked in the garment industry for years on the design and production side. So that was what really made me start thinking, that's when I joined Fashion Revolution about 4 years ago. And as I said, I teach at the V&A in Dundee. I teach fashion textiles and costume design. So many of you probably know a bit about Fashion Revolution already, but Fashion Revolution started in 2013. It was started by two designers, Ursula de Castro and Carrie Summers, when there was, in the wake of the Rana Plaza garment factory collapse. It was such a shocking garment factory disaster. 1,138 people lost their lives in this factory collapse, and Ursula and Carrie thought, the fashion industry can't go on this way, we have to make a change. So a fashion revolution, we feel that fashion should feel good. Much of the global fashion industry is opaque, exploitative, and environmentally damaging. It desperately needs revolutionary change. So our campaigns are very positive, lots of fun, but there's a serious side to it as well. At Fashion Revolution, behind the scenes, there's lots of research happening and gathering of all the numbers and statistics that we need to help campaign for actual change and change in legislation and things like this that will really make a difference. That's me.
Fantastic, thank you. And Niki, would you like to introduce yourself as well from Fashion Rev?
Hello, sorry, I'm fiddling about on this, trying to get your speak on. Hi, I'm Niki from Fashion Evolution. We started Fashion Evolution in Scotland just after the Rana Plaza, the year after the Rana Plaza disaster. And I'm a designer. I've been working in the industry for over 20 years. But just, yeah, I'm a real advocate for, you know, human rights, the environment, and I've seen the detrimental effects of fashion industry on, you know, working within the industry. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of take action for change, really. I've been working in sustainability for about 10 years. And it's a real passion to I'm not going to give up until we really make this industry work for the greater good.
Yeah, and I think, you know, today we'll touch on some of the issues around the fast fashion industry, which is really a baby, to be honest. You know, we can pinpoint fast fashion kind of starting in the way that we know it today in the 90s. So if you're about my age, it will be probably the norm, but it is not the norm for everyone on this planet, and for people of different ages. But it has completely changed the way that we view clothes, the way that we act around clothes, and also obviously the global markets. So we'll touch today on social sustainability factors, human rights breaches, such as the Rana Plaza, you know, was a terrible example of this, and also environmental effects that have happened with the rise of fast fashion, with over 100 billion items of clothing being produced each year at the moment. So before we start, Niki, I just wanted to check, are we live streaming on Fashion Revolution Scotland? Just because I can't see it up, and I know that there's quite a few people.
All I've got at the corner is live preparing.
Okay.
I could maybe cancel that and try again.
Okie dokie. Yeah, maybe just give me a wee wave when it's on there and I can pop it on the other.
I'm not sure why we are recording this, so if anything, we can share the recording afterwards. But yeah, it's just saying preparing. I don't know why it's not. Sorry, little technical hitch.
No worries, that's fine. I just think that I know there's quite a few people trying to join us on those platforms. So yeah, we'll see whether they can get through to us. Cool. So I wanted to start by just kind of setting the scene. It is going to be a really positive discussion because we've got really amazing panelists who are doing really positive and beautiful things to face fast fashion and to revolutionize the industry. But I just wanted to ask questions at the beginning of why should we care? Why should we be taking action and changing our relationship with fast fashion as individuals and in wider society? I know that there's many different areas for this, but I wondered if, Lynn, you could maybe start with sharing some of the environmental reasons we should care.
So, in a nutshell, globally, we're running out of raw materials. So we don't have enough raw materials in the planet, not just for clothing, but for anything that we want to do. So we've reached a point where we need to decide, do we want land for food, or do we want land to grow agricultural crops for clothing? So these global decisions, environmental decisions are really what's driving where we need to get to in terms of environmentally. In terms of climate change, I think we're seeing right now in this current lockdown, we're seeing how the climate is beginning to heal itself, be it temporarily, but we're seeing water purification or cleaning of water. We're seeing less carbon in the atmosphere due to less flying and transport. And so we really begin to see how our contribution to planet in terms of environmentally, how it has an impact, and that we need to address how we can reverse that. And so in terms of the garment industry and the fashion industry, the fact that it's so heavily reliant on fossil fuels, every part of the garment production process, and then the consumption process, and then the disposal process is touched by fossil fuel. Be that right from the raw material, from the petrochemical raw material, to the production process, to the transport, getting those garments out throughout the world. Even if it's an ethical garment, it will be touched by petrochemical in some kind of a way, even if you bought it online and it came via DHL. So that reliance on fossil fuel petrochemical really drives how we need to readdress our fashion system, our consumption system in general, but fashion is a key contributor, second biggest polluter on the planet, as I say, driven by fossil fuel.
Yeah, and I think, you know, what really hit me when I started looking into this was, you know, somebody telling me, you know, the textile industry is the second most polluting industry in the world after oil. And, you know, textile is the most resource intensive material to make in the world, except for concrete. So it's, you know, when we start to put it into those kind of perspectives, it kind of started to make me realize, you know, how much people need to be taking this on, but it just doesn't seem to be as, you know, widely there's not as much public awareness around this issue. I just wanted to check in whether any of our other panelists wanted to share about environmental issues that made them care.
Yeah, I mean, definitely I had a situation, obviously working in fashion and being sent abroad when we started changing from the 1990s to outsourcing products and more mass production, and also doing smaller collections and demanding bigger distances for things to be travelled, to be brought back into the country. That also had its own problems because of language difficulties, which is why we're involved again in sort of different groups of people at Remode, because different languages also affected how garments arrived, sizing, etc., how things were made. And I'm very interested in what Lynn was saying about doing a PhD on how the consumer actually responds to that, because it's the consumer that's asking for those extra sizes, those extra products, those extra things. And obviously years ago you were just bought what was on the shelf, be it only a white shirt and some Levi's, but now there seems to be this insatiable appetite for more and more product. And as an older person, I just find that really difficult to compromise.
I'm happy to respond. Am I okay to respond, Martha? Or so, yes, I think that's a brilliant point you raise, and it's really interesting in terms of my research. There are two key things that I'm looking at. One is how, as we as consumers perceive contamination, so how we perceive a garment to be contaminated. And the other thing that I'm looking at is misalignment. And what I see is that in terms of the cycle of a garment in someone's wardrobe and whether they decide to wear it once or a forever type, whether it's a forever garment or a once garment, is dependent on, a lot of the time, the fact that the consumer doesn't understand why it doesn't suit them. And it potentially doesn't suit them because it's not cut well. It's not cut for them. Most garments aren't cut for me. I'm 5'2", so most garments are first of all for someone who's 5'7" and above, so, or 5'5" and above, whatever the industry standard is. And so therefore, if I buy a dress, and over the years I've had so many dresses I haven't worn, or I've worn them once, realised the fit isn't right, and I can't take up the hem, I can't take it, it will ruin the shape. So the consumer, that's just a personal example, but we're building this evidence that the misalignment of a garment is potentially why consumers aren't wearing them, but they don't realise it's, oh, it's my fault and my body doesn't fit this. So it's that real challenging space that the, whose fault is it? So the consumer says this doesn't fit, but the industry hasn't designed it or constructed it for them. So it's a really unexplored space in a sense.
I definitely
feel that's really,
probably back in the day, I wondered if
I think that's a really interesting point, Lynn. I worked in the clothing industry. I worked with factories getting the fit right. That was one of my jobs. I worked with one factory. We'd translate the flat sketches into the working production sample, and it was my job to say the dart's in the wrong place, it's 2 centimeters too long, the sleeves are too wide here or too short here, or not long enough in this point and everything. And it takes a lot of effort, you know. And I used to say to people, we charged a lot for getting the sample right, but I mean, well, we'd say to these brands, if you don't get the sample right, you're not going to sell it, because if the fit isn't right, and you know, I would say if it was, say, for the Australian market, I mean, I would try and get the fit across the range. If you had, like, say, 5 summer dresses in the range, you would try and, you know, have something that maybe suited different shapes and bodies within that range, so that if you love that brand, you could try on 5 dresses and one of them is going to fit you really well. And so we'd think that through. But, you know, we'd take weeks to get the fit right, and we'd make another toile, and we'd get somebody in and try it on. We had a model that we worked with and everything. It takes a lot of effort, it takes time. A lot of brands, they don't do it.
Yeah, totally. And like, to put in my 2 pence, I just think it's wild that sort of as consumers we've been sold this tale that fashion, like what you see in the shop, should fit everybody. The reality is we are all completely different sizes, we're all different heights. Yes, you can take a size 6 sample and grade it up to maybe a 12 or a 14 at best, but if you're grading up to, say, an 18 plus, you need to sort of start at both ends of the spectrum and grade in between. You can't go from a size 6 to a size 22. It's not going to work. It's not going to fit that person. Yeah, basically.
Yeah,
it's one of the...
It's fantastic because you're all designers, so I feel like you all know so well how to, you know, curate clothes. And I think something that I've been thinking about a lot recently is the amount of waste that happens within the textile industry, both, like, you know, with people throwing away clothes or clothes not being bought, but also actually within the designing phases. So I wanted to maybe ask Yaz whether you had any thoughts on the amount of waste that is produced in the textile industry.
Yeah, I definitely agree. When you're doing sets of samples, especially for things like multiples, and you're getting to large numbers of tens of thousands of garments, obviously you can go through probably about 3 or 4 size sets for each design, for each style, and then you're putting those forward, and maybe one of those gets chosen. The other set of rails of all the garments you've produced in the slight different variations are waste. I know there's some links now with things like the Red Cross and some of the secondhand shops who are buying in clothes from that, like the TK Maxx systems, so that the samples are then sold on and not wasted. But at the same time, it's getting that fit right. And sometimes as a designer, it's almost like when you're at the couture end, it was perfect because obviously you could make exactly one garment for one person, exactly to the measurements, which is what my joy was as a pattern cutter. But I think when they brought in CAD with the computer systems, that sort of like generalized a lot of things. And there's not really any hand pattern cutting anymore, or hand measuring, or single garment make. Obviously, there's a lot of cost involved in that as well. So going from high street up to couture, you had the answer to the problem of the fit, but then you also had very constraining costs with the amount it costs to make a garment. So I never knew if I was the chicken or the egg, which was the problem. And it's very difficult to balance those two things. So I think something like the, with the Remote Collective, I've gone on to more of the side of trying to share that knowledge, because it seems very secretive within the fashion industry. And I think it's important that those ways of making and pattern cutting and original hand pattern cutting are shared, like grading and systems, so that people can have more of an understanding of how clothes can be made better.
Yeah, and Siobhan, I know that you work a lot with kind of thinking about textile waste and how to reuse that. And that's a lot of what Rejean is involved with. I wanted to ask maybe whether you know about how much, kind of denim is wasted, and how kind of that is, how do you kind of get it all as well, I was wondering.
I get it from the rag man, basically. I get bales from a vintage supplier, and it saves me going round all the charity shops, but I do still go around the charity shops to sort of hand pick colours. I guess it was first sort of illustrate, I guess I first sort of understood how much denim there was in circulation when I worked for Rocket in London. We used to get bales and bales of denim through from Canada, and we'd chop it all up, and I thought, if they can get that, denim is such a hard wearing fabric, it's built to last and it will always be relevant, like everybody has denim in their wardrobes. And it's a really easy to work with fabric. It's 100% cotton, and you're not producing new cotton, it's old cotton. So that was kind of my thinking. I have no idea on the stats, I'm not a stat person, so I have no idea how much secondhand denim is in circulation. But I know that there's a lot more sort of stretch denim in circulation, and that's the kind of an issue is sort of with new textiles, a lot of it is mixed fibres, and that's the stuff that doesn't break down. I think we need to sort of bring in legislation that forces all sort of makers, producers of all different fields to not just think about the design and the production and the manufacturing, but also think about the closed cycle. Like, you shouldn't be allowed to produce something unless you have a plan for its decomposition in a way. Like, I think that could help a lot. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, this was all discussed in the recent Parliamentary Environmental Audit Committee, which you can look it up online on parliament.uk. Look up the Fas Fashion environmental audit, and there was so many fantastic recommendations in there, and I don't know, maybe we'll have a change in government sometime soon and it'll all come into effect. Who knows? We can only wish.
Yeah.
So what we do have is extended producer responsibility. So by 2025, we will have European legislation on extended producer responsibility. And that is about end of life of product and ensuring that brands across the consumer cycle, consumer, not just fashion, but all products, are responsible or working towards extended producer responsibility. So we do see legislation beginning to come in, but of course with the UK we have the challenge that of course we're no longer part of the European Union, and whilst we are committed to, and the Scottish Government are committed to following European Union regulation, it depends how long that's going to last, how long that commitment is going to last, and how things are going to be disrupted.
I've seen a lot of there's some denim brands, I don't know if it was Levi's or Wrangler, or it could be totally different, but they start thinking about the sort of end of life, and they're only using finishings like buttons and rivets that can pop out easily. So, you know, if your garment is falling apart, you can pop out the fastenings. But then it's the thread you're using. Is it cotton? Do we pay for organic cotton thread? Most thread is polyester. So if you can take out all the metal metalworks, then say you're 100% reclaimed Rejean jacket is going to decompose, but then there's still polyester thread in there, so there's always going to be something, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because the main kind of, you know, word that comes out here is responsibility. And I think that, you know, it's been shown in the fast fashion industry that they have, you know, been able to escape responsibility at all like costs. And it makes me think of, you know, the amazing documentary called The True Cost, which I'm sure many of us, you know, kind of, you know, was an instigator into this amazing kind of exploration. And I think for me, yeah, looking into the cost of garments, but also, as you said, like the amount of like opaqueness, there's no transparency with where they get it from, where, you know, the conditions that it was made in, the pollution levels, but also what happens to it afterwards. So it's really exciting to hear, Lynn and Siobhan, that there are ideas coming forward about actually, you know, companies being responsible for their carbon footprint and the waste going forward. I just wanted to quickly, there's Mahab's got a question here, and so is Jenna. So I'm just going to read them both out and hopefully we can pick up on them. So the first question is, do you think the choice of raw material of the product will reduce waste in the design stage to incorporate principles of circularity? So I think Lynn, or you might be a good person to chat about that, whether the materials that we use, we can choose ones which would be more, I think, more successful and less wasteful in the whole design stage.
Yeah, I guess a lot of waste is down to your pattern cutting as well. And like when I was studying, like, you know, when you're pattern cutting or when you're cutting out a garment, there's a lot of waste, and what are you supposed to do with that? And you know, you could use it for stuffing, for cushions or other accessories. A lot of small brands are making scrunchies and other bits and bobs, but Cassandra from the Stitchery, and I'm sure there's a load of other people who have sort of developed zero waste pattern cutting, and I think more of that, and sort of really thinking about how you're cutting something. Instead of cutting away, you could be creating different seams and like constructing in a way that you're not sort of cutting too much away. And
Yeah,
that's using all of the fabric and the width of it, and then there's minimal that is going to go into the bin. And then if you're using natural or non-mixed fibers, then I guess then again that can decompose.
I mean, very, very interestingly, in Westwards particularly, they used very historical patterns which were based on Tudor outfits, which were, say, you know, a very flat cut sleeve, which were made from rectangles originally. So years and years and years ago in our historical past, we did use rectangular pattern cutting as a means of no waste because fabric was so expensive. And it's just an idea to be able to sort of teach that and share that, so that we can get back to using things like a very square cut or a very simple Tudor sleeve, or the way that, you know, you cut even in the 16th, 17th century would literally use every scrap of fabric. It's amazing.
That's amazing, because like the word sustainability and zero waste pattern cutting was not a word in the vocabulary of my education, which is madness. But yeah, more zero waste pattern cutting and manufacturing, learning and skill sharing is what we need, I think.
And I just wanted to raise Jenna's question as well from the comments, and maybe ask Vivienne or Niki if they'd like to share on this first. Jenna just asks, what can consumers do to push for legislation for brands to have a plan for the end life of the garment? So looking at the waste and recycling, are there any petitions that we can sign, and what else can we do?
Could I start here actually?
Sure. Yeah, on you go, Lynn.
Be a bit logical, sorry, because the challenge that we have is that we don't actually know what we want our garments to do. So there is an assumption that fashion and fast fashion, the minute I hear those terms in my head, I'm immediately that little £4 boohoo dress But that's not the issue. The issue is that as consumers, we have a 24-hour life cycle. And in that 24-hour life cycle, we use clothing, fashion for different things. And we want our clothing and fashion to do different things for us. And so within that, we want all sorts of things. We want to be able to go to the gym. We want our leggings to do it for us. So we want that level of fibre within a garment that if you were to extract it, that garment wouldn't be able to perform for you. So therefore, as a consumer, you wouldn't want it. So the challenge that we have in terms of, we can have transparency, absolutely, from an ethical perspective, and we really need that. But when we start to look at what we want from legislation in terms of end of life, then we really need more knowledge of what does the consumer want from a garment in the first place. What are they doing? So it's far more complicated. So for example, Siobhan, in your industry, so I see in your industry, in denim, as you said, denim is getting far rarer to find 100% cotton denim jeans. And my favourite pair of denim that really fit me are 58% tencel, 24% cotton, and 2 other fibres in them. And they fit me like they're incredible. They're second hand, they're exceptionally expensive, but they have lasted. I see consumers who have denim, it might be a mid-range brand, it might be a low-value brand, they all have the same design problems. They all go at the crotch and they all go at the knees. The crotch and the knees go first. So we have some real challenges around what we know and what we don't know about consumer life cycles before we can really start to understand how to change the system. And so in terms of consumers, the main thing is that brand transparency, because I think brand transparency will help consumers decide what it is, who they want to go with, who they want to buy their product from, but also what they need. We need more consumer education on what clothing actually needs to do for us, what we want clothing to do.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, I mean, I'm becoming a huge advocate for mending and like looking at mending your clothes as a way of elevating them. If you buy something from a fast fashion chain, either first hand or second hand or whatever you buy, if it goes somewhere, if you can repair it in a sort of unique or a colourful way or in an invisible way, that garment is no longer this mass-produced thing that everybody else has. It's yours and you put your stamp on it. And yeah, I think it's a lot about educating and just respect and just understanding. People are used to being able to access everything, order £200 worth of stuff on Amazon, try it all on, send it back, and not have a second thought. And it's just sort of trying to force people or invite them to sort of think a bit more about it all, as a nicer way to put it.
I think that's definitely something with the Remode Collective that we're really, really keen on, is to try and skill share, because we've got so many different techniques from different people, and especially when we're using immigrants who are coming to the country with all different skills from different countries. There's all sorts of ways of embroidery, of decoration, of mending, tailors from Syria, all sorts of different people from Italy, Spain. They've got fantastic skills, and all of those can be used to keep your garment going if you can learn to sew. And unfortunately, we don't do sewing in school anymore, which I'm really surprised at. So
yes,
I think we need to teach girls and boys.
Definitely. And it's really important. This is about extending the life of the garment. What we were discussing as well as the end of life. So it's two slightly different things. And of course, when you're talking about the end of life of garment, it's really vitally important what is the textile composition is, and that's something that Lynn was mentioning before. And we have a lot of the clothing that you can buy on the high street at the moment is quite complicated textile compositions with synthetic fibres mixed with different synthetic fibres and even a little proportion of cotton. And depending on what the actual textile composition is, depends on how it can be reused at the end of its life. So of course, when I think of the end of life garment, I think the very, very end. So either at landfill, how it decomposes, or how it can be reclaimed, shredded in some way, or used as a sort of insulation fibre or different things. I just wanted to say as well, in the How to Be a Fashion Revolutionary booklet, which is available in the resources section on our fashionrevolution.org website, there's a page here which I'm just going to show you, which is all about how long does it take clothes to decompose in landfill, which is quite eye-opening. And it's just a rough idea, because again, some of these are might be mixed fibers, so it would be different. But I think when we're talking about the end of life of a garment, having information about this is very thought-provoking about how we take care of our clothing, how long we keep it in our wardrobe. I mean, polyester and synthetic fabrics are just horrible when you throw it into landfill. I saw this STV report on all the clothing that is donated to charity and shipped out to Uganda, and it's just this big seething, boiling hot mess chucked at the edge of the sea in Uganda, and it's just leaching horrible chemicals into the ocean. And when you think about it for a minute, all of our waterways on our entire planet are all connected like a big sort of system of arteries, and it's just leaching a load of horrible toxic soup into our planet's waterways. Really about one thinking, and this is such a Lynn question really, it's what I've done. I've been teaching on a few fashion courses in the last couple of years, and I always say it's vitally important when you think about sustainability in a design point of view, you have to really think about the fabric that you use and what is the whole story and what is going to be the end of its story and how that can continue around in a circle. And even eventually, if it can be reclaimed, or if it does end up in landfill by accident somewhere along the way, it's not going to be toxic.
It feels like...
I hope that answers your question quite a lot.
Yeah.
Again, the challenge we have is if your leggings are your favourite gym leggings and you have worn them today and they are full of lycra and other polymer, the challenge we have is where do they go? And we have new technologies, but we don't have them quick enough for polymer recycling. But even so, we don't have enough consumer education at the moment to help understand how that would work. So that when you donate your clothing to the H&M recycle point, where H&M are trialling different technologies, including closed loop polymer recycling, but these are in the very early stages. But I go back to the challenge of that 65% of the clothing we wear is petrochemical, because it helps us to do so much that without it, we would be really disappointed consumers. And so we have built up this reliance on petrochemical because it gives us so much. And so how do we start to reverse that, or how do we start to, we see new biomaterials coming into the fore. We see fibers that mimic polymer, such as from insect shells. But again, that's a long way off between the new technology and the critical mass that will be able to fulfill the market challenge.
What are your thoughts on brands like, have you heard of Girlfriend Collective? One of my favourite pairs of leggings are from them, and they claim, I think they are quite ethical, they claim to have made them from recycled plastic bottles. So there are, and obviously there's a lot of like new recycled sort of modern materials that do sort of last the test of time, and sort of they are fit for purpose in terms of modern life. you know.
So that's an example of a perfect closed loop.
But yeah, but then if that's made from recycled, but then how is that going to decompose?
Can you turn off the thing, because this is, I'm glitching.
Okay,
Yeah, sorry. Does that help? Yeah, I'm just wondering how we.
Sorry, Siobhan.
Yeah, I'm just sort of wondering how, you know, there are like great stretch fibers out there that are recycled or are made from recycled plastic bottles, and so if that's the case, then I guess that is a more sustainable fabric that is fit for sort of modern life. But then I think we need to, well, there obviously is research going into this, and there's a lot of trials and whatever else, but further down the line, the little man, if I am cutting something, say it isn't a new fabric, that scrap fabric, I think we need more sort of knowledge and education on how to recycle fibres. You can recycle old clothes either by extending their life or giving them to charity or whatever else, but with actual scrap raw material, what can we do with that? And like, there's a lot of brands that are breaking it down and turning it into a fabric. So why can't we recycle pieces of material the same way we can plastic bottles, cardboard, cans, all of that thing? I think that would, like, that's what I'm really interested in, and I don't know enough about. I don't know if you know anything about that.
So we know that with natural fibres, so natural fibre like cotton or wool is like similar keratin makeup to our hair. So therefore, we can only process it 2 or 3 times before it's a lot weaker, and we're unable to start to use it again until we put a virgin mix in there. So for example, perhaps you're a fan of the model Mud Jeans, the jeans leasing system in the Netherlands, Mud. And so Mud, when they take back your jeans, they use, I think it's something like 30% of recycled fibre goes into their denim, and then the other 70% is virgin cotton. But all the time they're beginning to reduce the need for virgin raw cotton for denim, and they're creating this completely closed loop. But Kiev, they did work with, I think Vivienne Westwood has been working with them, or she did work at some point, because they recognised that the design of the denim wasn't that great. The design of their jeans, and also the quality of the fibre, the mixed fibres, was also a bit of a challenge for them, because the technology isn't as sophisticated yet as it needs to be. So there are questions around what fibres are suitable for the garments that we have, so that if we think about the planet as one ball of raw materials, and if we had little piles of different raw materials, what do we actually want cotton to do? How can we make that lasting pair of denim jeans that can be reinvented and reinvented if that's what we want cotton for? If we want polymer for, like, for example, for me, there is an incredible photograph from Extinction Rebellion marches, and there's an Extinction Rebellion campaigner being dragged away by the police, and then beside the police there are cameramen, photographers and journalists, and then there's the public, and it's raining, and everybody has one thing in common: they are all wearing petrochemical based waterproof jackets. Everybody, from the campaigner to the police, that we're all wearing a protective piece of clothing that's made from petrochemical. Therefore, that's a very great development for society, to be able to have a protective material. But then we have a fantastic natural fibre that's about those breathability, longevity, quality. So we need to start to really think, we've got all these different piles of material, but what is the best use of them? And is a $1.99 glamorous garment with sequins all over it, is that the best use of those materials? And if it is, how can we make that more sustainable? But I think at the minute we're a bit stuck in creativity. We're a bit stuck, as Siobhan, you've pointed out. As a designer, you want to know more about fibre, and you want to understand, but how do we get that information out, and how do we make it workable quickly in a studio and design studio that maintains a full production model?
Yeah.
And can I just say again, you know, originally what we used to have was lamb's wool, or without the oil taken out of it, is perfectly waterproof. Before we had petrochemicals, we had lamb's wool coats, and we used to pass them down from our grandparents, and Shetland wool jumpers, and they went through 4 or 5 generations. So all these things, there are possibilities, and there's lots of historical anecdotes for things that can be used. But I think as this is the problem, I think we've got this sort of impasse between the longevity of fashion design going back through historical times to where we are now, and there's just too big a gap, and people can't see how to get back.
Definitely.
Yeah, but also there are also really interesting companies who are working really hard to make new textiles that are using up textile waste, and of course you have to have a combination as well. You can have certain cotton, for instance, has really long fibers. It's very strong when it's virgin cotton, but you can get the mix right, and you can use a certain proportion of recycled cotton, cutting room cotton, and other cotton and cellulose fibers. So people like Lenzing are making fibers like Tencel, but also Refibra and things like this. So there are people in the textile industry who are working really hard in this field to innovate new fabrics to address these questions. But also, Siobhan, going back to your recycled plastic bottle leggings, no, I think that there's a lot of fabrics out there, but using recycled plastic bottles, swimwear fabrics, and leggings and everything. And I think there's a lot of pluses about them. I do, especially if the company as well, if your leggings wear out and you can send them back to the company, and then they can reclaim the fabric or send it back to the fabric producer to be reclaimed back into making leggings again, then they're really thinking about it from the right angle, I would say, if that's the case. But my question to them always is, have they tested it for if it sheds microfibers? Because that's one of the big marine pollution issues that we have, is microfibers being shed from our synthetic fabric. And I think I'm not often getting very positive answers in terms of no, we've tested it and it doesn't. That's the answer I want, but I'm just saying I'm not often getting that answer.
Yeah,
but that's not going to happen right now. We don't have the technology for that, but we do have technology that begins to look at how we reduce that shedding. But it's not going to, there isn't going to be an eradication problem just now. But going back to Kia's, the point about the wool and wool fibre and the waterproof challenge is that what we have to recognise is that, and also we said that in the 1990s, fast fashion started in the 1990s, but the Industrial Revolution actually started in Glasgow in the early 1800s. So we've had this for 200 years. And when the Industrial Revolution started, then there was 1.5 billion people on the planet. Now there are 7.5 billion, and 8 billion by 2025 is predicted. And so when we look at the volume of people that we need to clothe now, the challenge that we have is that we can't, we don't have enough natural fibre production in the form of sheep to maintain production. But again, you can argue that that's because in Western society, we have an abundance of clothing. Therefore, if we reduce that need to own, but we retain circularity so that we can have what we want in as fast a cycle as we want, but it's a continuous movement so that, Siobhan, we have that classic denim piece that lasts. That's our go-to staple, our capsule wardrobe. But everything else, we want something on a Friday night, we want to wear it once, and then Saturday morning we want to diss it. We can find the technology to do that. Yes, that would then give us that opportunity to go back to using those natural fibres, because we would only need one garment for life. We only need one outer layer for life. So then we can play around with the other materials we have. But it's about loosening ourselves up and really thinking about, what do we mean by sustainable wardrobes? What do we mean by ethical consumption? What do we really, really mean, balanced by what we really want to do as consumers? Because if you're in this space, if you're trying to be an ethical consumer, you're probably absolutely stressed out every day going, am I making the right decisions? What am I doing? And you're panicking because you've got 2 kids and you've got a husband and you're in Sainsbury's and you're doing your shopping, and you know you've got kids with the holy knees and you don't have time to repair them. And we've got all these challenges. And so we need to really loosen up. This is what I believe. We need to loosen up the debate and have more deeper understanding of what we're actually doing with clothing, so that we can start to really build systems and build fashion for people and not for ideals.
Yeah,
there's definitely a very
sorry, Kiaz, I'm just going to pop in here because I recognise we've only got about 8 minutes left. But this is a really important discussion, because we're not only here talking about the types of fabric that are most sustainable and you know what we should use, which I know Fashion Revolution Scotland has a lot of resources on. And you know, Siobhan's done amazing work with Rejean as well on the sustainability of fashion and denim. But it's, you know, we're also talking about the whole life cycle of a product, not just wearing it and buying it and, you know, wasting it or giving it, you know, in the bin or to a charity shop. But we're talking about, where does it come from? How can we make that sustainable, all the way to where does it go and how do we make that sustainable? And interestingly, you know, textile recycling is, as you were saying, Lynn, one of the kind of least resourced kind of technologies out there at the moment, and that's because it is so complicated. It's just one of the hardest things to kind of recycle fibers back into reusable materials. But I wanted to focus a wee bit on some questions that people have here, just for the last 5 minutes, if that's all right. So I know that if anyone else has any questions that they really want to ask, feel free to pop them into the chat section now, and we'll try and answer a couple of them. But I am going to have to just have one person answering each question just for this time, because I'd like to close with yeah, kind of the main thing that each panelist thinks we should do on a personal or wider political level to tackle fast fashion. If you could have one wish that every single consumer did, or one wish that, you know, one policy change that we could make, what would that be? But before that, I think Mahab's question was answered, but Ellie had a question about what does this mean for new designers? Have you got any kind of inspiration or guidance for new designers that when there are already too many brands, what should this mean for future designers in the industry? And how do they make their way?
I guess not that you need to sort of think. I think if you're going to get into the fashion space, you need to make sure you're doing it for the right reasons and that you're going to sort of be on the right side of it, which obviously you are if you're even part of this discussion. But I guess you're part of the change if you're, and your education is actually educating you like on sustainability and on the ethical side of things. Like it's the basis of most of your projects at unis, or any that I've engaged with, it is. But I think you need to be sort of leading the way in terms of reuse, like, well, in my opinion anyway. There are too many textiles in the world, and you can either help sort of produce new innovative fibers that can break down or whatever, everything that we've talked about today, or you can sort of be at the forefront of these new production methods that are going to sort of, in some innovative way, like not just denim, but with all sort of fabrics, like reuse them in a way that is high end and that is covetable, and, you know, create something not off of a roll but off of a material that's already had a life, and that's the sort of challenge, I think. And if you can sort of do something in any way in that realm, then you'll be fine.
I would say as well that my advice is always, when I'm speaking to young designers and people who are coming and wanting to learn how to get into a fashion industry, is just really try and concentrate on one thing. Really minimize where you're heading, and really concentrate on where your primary interest is. That way you can just pick one thing, like a company like, I don't know if you've heard of Hewitt Denim in Wales, who literally just make jeans. That's all they do. They just do one thing, but their byline is just do one thing and do it really well.
Definitely.
I feel like it's such a great opportunity for new designers right now, because I feel like we're all jaded with the big brands in the high street. I think the whole high street has become very the same. There's nothing exciting, you know. There's a real desire for creativity, individuality, and I feel like the future belongs to new designers. Siobhan, I think, is totally in agreement with where I think we need to use waste. There's so much textiles, and I think the real innovative new designers, young designers that I see right now are the ones that are using textiles that are already in existence. And Siobhan is going to be part of our Fashion Open Studio, which is running all week with the most amazing innovative designers. If you head to the Fashion Revolution page or look at Fashion Open Studio, every day we've got the most amazing innovative designers showing really new ways of working, and I feel like these guys are leading the future, and they're running amazing workshops. And I must say, most of them are using textiles that are already in existence. So there's, you know, they're using the waste, that huge amount of waste that's out there. So picking up the new designers.
Yeah, and Fashion Revolution Scotland have got amazing events on all week. This is one of them. I just wanted to maybe finish off with, I know Joe Elston's asked whether you have any advice for looking at brand supply chains to work out which fabrics, you know, were ethically and environmentally produced. And I know that Fashion Revolution's got an amazing transparency report that looks into this. But I just wanted to maybe ask each panelist to just share one thing, if they had one wish that either consumers or, you know, a policy that they could make, what would it be? So would anyone like to start? Kiaz, if you're...
Yeah, mine would definitely be to reintroduce sewing lessons. Just learn to sew, and if you can just learn to sew, it makes such a massive difference to what you're either using or reusing or mending, or just knowing about construction of garments is going to teach you so much anyway. And things like the Remode Collective have drop-in workshops and places you can learn to embroider. They have open studios, they're free classes, there's loads of stuff online. So if you look at the Remode Collective, anyone can come as a volunteer, or you can come and just join in and just learn to sew. That's it.
Awesome. And Siobhan, would you like to share?
Yeah, second that. I mean, if you can sew on a button, that will immediately extend the life. But yeah, I think to kind of go on about COVID, and when we come out of it all, I really hope that swap shops are going to be the new big thing instead, and I really hope that they're going to sort of make it into the mainstream. I think that could be a big impact for change. And I also think, in terms of mending takes time, and darning and doing all these cool intricate mends to make a garment look amazing. And actually I think what we hopefully will see is makers and sort of craftsmen, artisans, they will sort of start offering like this service to the consumer. So instead of buying a new t-shirt, yes, this is an old t-shirt that I might bought from Zara years ago, I'm going to elevate it, pay somebody else to do it, because yeah, you do have kids and you've got this job and you've got to feed the Waynes and blah, 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 you've got life. So pay somebody else to do that. I think that and swap shops, and more colourful old Primark t-shirts that are 5 years old still in circulation.
Yeah, and also, you know, we at the Shrub Co-op, we have a swap shop in Edinburgh, but we also have clothes swaps on a monthly basis. So yeah, feel free to check out the Shrub Co-op after COVID, and we'll be around for that. I just wanted to ask Vivienne if you had one wish for people to know.
Well, I was going round in circles because trying to boil it down to just one, but it would be mend something, swap something, and ask the brands to take the responsibility. So our core campaign at Fashion Revolution from the very beginning has been a very simple: take a selfie, put your top inside out, or your dress inside out and back to front, show the label, take a selfie, ask the brand, hashtag who made my clothes, and I always say, were they paid fairly and treated well? And this year I'm asking, have they been paid during the coronavirus time?
Yeah, so important. And Niki, I just wanted to ask if you had anything.
Yeah, I was just going to say hashtag who made my clothes. So important right now, but I guess the thing is I really want policy. I want government change. I feel like if we're going to solve the climate crisis within the next 10 years, companies have to be forced to change, because at the moment, I mean, and I have worked in large companies, a fashion company can act in any way it wants. There's no rules, there's no limits. And that's basically what has been a major problem in this industry. So I kind of really want, I mean, it's such a shame that the audit committee didn't go through it. So I feel like as citizens, we need to really step up our campaign. We have to ask the brands, put pressure on brands, but also we need to speak to our policymakers, so important. And they will listen. You know, we all have our local MSP, and I think it's really important to just, you know, ask them if they can help us, you know, to make the industry safer for everyone.
Fantastic, thank you so much. And Lynn, what would be your wish?
Yeah, so following on from Niki, it's really important that when we're talking to policymakers that we have a key ask. So my ask is, if we take the VAT off of clothing rental, new clothing access models like clothing and leasing, if we took the VAT off of that, it would make clothing rental models much more affordable, and it would make them much more mainstream, which in turn would make the high street brands think about how they then access that market and begin to change the system. So I think absolutely, just writing to MPs is so critical, just raising the awareness of fashion. But if you wanted a particular ask, it's taking the VAT off of new business models for fashion. Thank you.
Yeah, these are amazing points. Thank you so much. Yeah, I just wanted to thank all the panelists. They're all amazing experts in their field, and you can write down their names and contacts. It's on the Facebook page as well, because they've all got amazing work going on, and really positive case studies of the future of the fashion industry, in my opinion, and ways to, yeah, kind of really revolutionize the industry that we know, and that has come about in a very weird way. So it is the future, and thank you so much. I also just wanted to do a wee shout out for, we have online sewing sessions at the moment at the Shrub on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So if anyone wants to join our online sewing sessions, our awesome volunteer Mary runs those, and you can find those on our Shrub Co-op page. Also, we have a sustainable fashion meetup once a month, and this month we're hosting it with Remode. So Kiara's colleague Kiara and Monica will be coming and talking to us about inclusivity and accessibility around mending. So feel free to join us with that. That's next Wednesday, 6 to 8 p.m. I just wanted to recognize that we didn't get through all the questions because everybody asked awesome questions, but feel free, yeah, to message and keep up the discussion on the Facebook page if you'd like to. And I want to really recognize that we didn't get to touch on what COVID-19 means to the fast fashion industry. I think this deserves a whole panel discussion in its own right. And hopefully, yeah, we can work with Fashion Revolution Scotland to get something out about that in the next couple of weeks as well. So
there was a really good live yesterday with Mary Beth. What was it called? The ethical one.
What's next?
Yes, that if you're wanting to kind of find out more about the supply chain and COVID and the workers and all that stuff, it's yeah, go and check that out, and that will touch on a few things that we didn't get to today.
We'll be posting it up on the Fashion Evolution Facebook, so please.
Yeah, we will be.
Thank you so much.
And also just one last, the workersrights.org has got a live tracker of who's being paid and who's not being paid during the COVID-19 situation. So which brands are paying their suppliers and which brands aren't. So if that's something that you're worrying about and keeps you awake at night, like me, then workersrights.org will tell you who's being paid and who isn't.
Amazing. Such a good cause to look into at the moment. Thank you so much for sharing. Great. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I hope you have an amazing evening.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, and thanks for a brilliant chair. Fantastic. And well done, Niki, and well done on everything.
Thanks, Mara. Bye.
Great evening. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.